So guys, I want to do another tough video today, and I want to talk about the time I worked at Southern Connecticut State University and I was bullied by the gymnastics coach. So, I do want to talk about the story and I do want to talk about patterns of bullying. And what to identify to protect yourself. So what happened was that they would give us overtime assignments. So wherever you want to do overtime, you do overtime. So what happened was the first day that I was doing overtime, I was doing a really great job, and then I was charging my phone in the work locker room, and then I was taking my break, and then what happened was that I heard loud banging sounds, and when I opened the door, the coach just had his foot stretched out, like he was literally just kicking the door hard as he could, and he was like after that, really. And the reason why he did that was because I forgot to lock his office and he was upset that somebody could steal his computer. And I did report it to my manager, but my manager, did nothing about it really, because that was kind of how it went at Southern, really, where it was kind of like it is what it is attitude. Unless it's something very major, they're not willing to stop harassment. They're not willing to stop bullying. It has to be you calling the union, or it has to be you making it a super, super big deal. So, the other thing about it, pardon me, just my foot. But the other day that, the other thing that happened after that was that I was cleaning a bunch of offices and he was saying something like, you forgot to do this area, that area. And I was like, no, I was told not to do those areas. And he was kind of like talking to somebody else, like, I know his job better than he knows it and other things like that. Again, it's kind of like that other thing too, like where at Southern, they kind of expect you to have like a hood attitude. You're supposed to go in there, you're supposed to yell and scream people's faces, like, you don't tell me what to do, whatever. So sometimes, you're going to also get that at some jobs where it's almost like, people are like, well, since you don't act all like ratchety and ghetto and and stand up for yourself. People are just going to occasionally just talk crap really about your work quality. And again, the other thing about it was that I just let it go really because I just didn't like to stand up for myself because when I grew up around a bunch of domestic violence and you know and seeing tables being flipped over and whatever, really. You can't do that at work, even though the guy deserved it. And then the next thing that happened was that he asked me if I wanted to work at the gym. It was really just kind of like dumbass is the word. I don't want to use the retarded anymore. It was really kind of dumbass. So it's almost like I'm working there for like 6 hours. Like in gyms, a lot of gymnastics people use like chalk and whatever. So he was like saying you're doing a great job. So he's like, did anybody tell you about having a job at the college? I've been working there for like almost 10 years really. So it's almost like, what the fuck, man? That's just the most stupidest thing to say. Like I work at a hospital. So imagine if I was cleaning a hospital room very well and the patient was saying, do you want a job at the hospital? I don't get it. But I do want to talk a little bit about, some consequences. That first of all, usually when it comes to overtime, there's overtime in many jobs that people avoid. They're like, okay, I don't want to work with this person, or I don't want to work with this building because I know how the people who run it are really. So definitely that's just very, very important because because we got to just say to ourselves, what why should I, work in this area if I know it's going to be a lot of work, or if it's going to be like, a lot of work in the sense of, somebody's like, trying to monitor me. They're trying to criticize everything I do. They're trying to write me up. They're trying to do all this stuff really. Or why should I kind of work in an area where, you have people like disrespect you like that really, that's the big thing as well, really. Like a lot of times the gym wasn't clean because I think the person who used to work there retired, but also too that nobody just wanted to work there and do overtime because the guy was the guy that had the coach was that guy was a douchebag. So I think for you guys, I think it's important to dissect this a little bit and talk about how to identify bullying that the first thing is that when he was kicking the door, because that automatically does two things. Because if I don't do anything about it, like I don't yell at him, or I don't look like, or I just kind of give him like an angry look, like I just like charge up to him and look like, I'm about to whoop your ass for doing that. Or the next thing is, how should I kind of say this? That I don't report to human resources, or my boss is not going to like support me on that. It allows him to do whatever, really. So sometimes we got to stand up for ourselves. Sometimes we got to say, hey, you know what? Sometimes we got to like be assertive, and sometimes we got to, talk to our manager. Sometimes we got to be a pain in the ass to human resources. The union say, hey, this guy was like kicking the door, and he was disrespecting me. And one thing in the workplace is that's enough to say that that's harassment. And then the next thing you can say it's vandalism. And then the next thing you can say is, as I toss to the hospital, you have to respond appropriately, but you can talk to a manager to say that you're not tolerating disrespect, really. Because, again, how is stuff going to get done when people don't want to work with somebody who's being disrespectful, really? How is that gym going to get clean? How are they going to clean up all that chalk and everything like that when people don't want to work there because the guy is being an asshole? So like I said, so the big things, nip it in the butt from the beginning, and then also, like I said, if it's overtime and it's like, okay, now I know what this guy's like, I don't want to pick him any more overtime, then don't do it, and tell your boss, hey, you know what, this happened, and this is why I'm not doing it, and I'm just not going to take people's crap, really. The next thing that I learned in my life is very important. My psychiatrist taught me this, is that, because I did go to therapy for a while, that you have to judge the environment. So I worked at Southern. There's a lot of bullying. There's a lot of entitlement. There's a lot of people doing whatever the hell they want, really. And there's not a lot of, unless it's something major, there's not a lot of support to stop something like that. There was an incident where I had a boss who did a really great job, and and somebody came for the night shift to work on her shift, and this person did not like the area that they were assigned, so they acted like they had a panic attack, and then an ambulance got called, and that's when they brought that person back to third shift, really. So it does say something. So when you know stuff like that happens at your job, really, you got to say, hey, you know what? How do I survive? How do I function, really? And the way I should have functioned was like saying, hey, you know what? Either I get a better job, either I change departments, or I do something like, I say, okay, you know what? I got to do all the overtime assignments. If there's 10 different assignments, I'll do 10 different ones. Then make a list of all the ones that work out for me and all the ones that don't work out, and then just say to hell with the people and the overtime that doesn't work out for me. That's another thing. Judge your environment. The third thing is just knowing when to stand up for yourself. Because like I said, and then the third thing about bullying is a person seeing what they get away with, and then the other part of it is passive aggressive comments. Like, again, it kind of goes down to what I said about this guy when he was telling me that he knew how to do my job, and then he and his secretary were both having a conversation about saying, you know what, I don't know what I work overtime, so I don't know what I'm doing, and he knows what I'm doing, really. Like, it's just like kind of disrespect, really. So you got to just so in those situations, you got to say to yourself, do I really want to work around a person like that? Because you know what, it is disrespectful, and there's a lot of people who have that mentality of, you know what, I have the right to disrespect you, or I'll just even talk crap about you, or crap about your work, or crap about what you're not doing when they've not done a day of custodial work, So it's important, as I said before, and I'll say it again, that I stopped doing overtime there because I was like, this guy's an asshole. And then the third thing was that bullies can be nice to you. And that's part of manipulation. That's part of drawing you in, really, by saying, hey, you know what, you do a really great job. Do you want to work over here? And I think that's what he meant to say, really. But he said, oh, do you want to be hired to the gym? Do you want a job at the college when I'm already working there? Do you want a job at the college to work at the gym? That makes no sense. But that's one of the reasons why I don't, why I stopped working there. Because I was like, I get that. I get like how you're just you're being passive aggressive. You think you can kick doors, and then the other thing is that I'm not supported by my management. And then also you're trying to be nice so I can kind of have that job so you can kind of pick on me every single day, really. So it's unfortunate. And then also another thing that I do is I do talk about things online, really. Like I worked at Southern. There is a huge issue of workplace bullying at that job. There's a huge issue of management and human resources of the union picking and choosing who they're going to support and not support. And I also feel that there's an issue of mental health discrimination. Like I was misdiagnosed with autism. So there's many people at that job who are like, oh, well, maybe Byron's autistic, or maybe my brother's autistic. We're gonna see what we can get away with. We're gonna see how we can see what we can get away with. We're gonna just keep taking advantage of people because that's kind of how that job ran, which was, oh well, we'll take all the good workers and we'll treat them like crap, really, or part of work is to tolerate crappy treatment. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of people who have that thinking that okay, part of a job is to tolerate bullshit or tolerate bullying when that's never okay in the workplace in the first place. You got to change your jobs and get more experience, really. So, it's unfortunate that it happened. I don't forgive him because when it comes to forgiveness, people have to work at it to earn my forgiveness. Because otherwise, you kind of live in a world of somebody like robbing you and you forgive them and then they rob you again because they never worked on their issue. So so that happened, really. And the guy is he's a jerk for what he did. He's not like he's not like he's not like evil or he's not like a permanent asshole, really, but he was an asshole for how he treated me. But I'm happy to give you guys advice on how to identify workplace bullying and just like really the tricks that they do of trying to get away with what they can and then try to manipulate you so you can kind of like continue to work at a job and digest the bad treatment when you shouldn't be tolerating that in the first place.